Every single year, $60 billion quietly leaves corporate bank accounts and flows directly into sports. Not into player salaries, not into stadium construction, not into broadcast deals, into something most fans never think about for even a single second while they're watching the game. And here's the thing. The people writing those checks aren't doing it out of passion. They're not sports fans making emotional decisions. They are some of the most calculating financial minds in the world. And they have concluded, after decades of data, that sports is the single most powerful vehicle on Earth for one specific thing. We'll get to exactly what that thing is. But first, I need to show you a number that will make everything else in this video make sense. $126 million. Remember that number. Because in a few minutes, you're going to find out what it was supposed to be. And when you hear the real target, you're going to understand why the entire sports business world still hasn't fully recovered from the shock. Let's start with what most people think they know. You've seen the logos. On jerseys, on stadium walls. On the court floor, the sideline banners, the scoreboard, the corner of the TV screen during a broadcast. You've heard the stadium names. Names of banks, names of airlines, names of tech companies, names of cryptocurrency exchanges. You've watched athletes hold up products in commercials and smile at cameras. You probably think you understand how this works. A company pays money. Their name goes somewhere visible. Fans see it. Brand awareness goes up. Deal done. But here's what you don't know. That description, that version of how sponsorship works, is so incomplete, it's almost misleading. The logo you see is not the product being sold. The stadium name is not what the brand is paying for. And the athlete holding up the sneaker is not the reason the deal is worth billions. What is actually being bought and sold is something you can't photograph, can't measure in square footage, and can't count in seconds of airtime. And once you understand what it really is, you will never watch a sponsored sporting event the same way again. Here is the real architecture of a sports sponsorship deal. When a fan walks into a stadium, something happens to them that doesn't happen almost anywhere else in daily life. They stop being a consumer. They stop being a skeptic. The ordinary psychological defenses that people maintain against advertising, the filters, the cynicism, the indifference, those defenses drop. Because they're not there to buy something. They're there to feel something. They are emotionally exposed in a way that is extraordinarily rare. Their heart rate is elevated. Their identity is engaged. The outcome of what happens on that field or court matters to them in a way that is deeply personal, almost irrational. They have built years, sometimes decades, of memory and meaning around this team, this sport, this moment. And the brand sitting on that jersey, painted on that wall, attached to that athlete's name, it absorbs all of that. It absorbs the emotion. It absorbs the loyalty. It absorbs the meaning. And it carries that absorbed energy back into the marketplace. That is not advertising. Advertising is interruptive. Advertising asks for your attention and then releases you. What sponsorship does is fundamentally different. It embeds a brand inside an emotional experience that the viewer already chose to have. The brand doesn't interrupt the feeling. It becomes part of it. This is why brands pay $60 billion a year for access to sports. Not for logos, for emotional real estate, for a piece of the relationship between fans and the thing they love most. And the more you understand that principle, the more a deal like this next one stops looking crazy and starts looking like one of the smartest business moves in modern history. In 2021, a cryptocurrency exchange called crypto.com signed a deal worth $700 million. $700 million for 20 years of naming rights on what had been known for 35 years as Staples Center, home of the Los Angeles Lakers, the LA Clippers, and the LA Kings. When the announcement came out, the reaction was almost universal. $700 million for a name on a building, for a company most Americans had never heard of, in one of the most volatile, trust-deficient industries in the world? But here's what the critics missed. Crypto.com wasn't paying $700 million for a name on a building. They were paying $700 million to be permanently fused into the daily language of Los Angeles sports. Every time a fan says, "I'm going to the game tonight," they say the name. Every broadcast, every social media post, every news article about every Lakers game for the next 20 years says the name. A stadium name doesn't get skipped like a commercial. It doesn't get muted. It gets said by people who love what happens inside it, millions of times, for 2 decades. And then the Super Bowl came to that stadium. Over 100 million television viewers watched coverage that referenced the venue by name repeatedly across 3 days of broadcast. Crypto.com went from obscure to globally recognized in less than 12 months. Was $700 million a lot of money? Absolutely. Was it worth it? The data suggests they paid a fraction of what the exposure was actually worth. But here's what I haven't told you yet. Stadium naming rights are actually one of the more straightforward forms of sports sponsorship. What happens when the deal isn't about a building, but about a person? What happens when a brand doesn't just buy a place, but buys a human being's entire public identity? That's where things get truly extraordinary. You probably already know the name Michael Jordan. But I need you to forget for a moment everything you know about what he became, and focus on what he was in the summer of 1984. He was a 21-year-old rookie. Talented, yes. Scouts knew it. But so were dozens of other players entering the league that year. He had not won anything. He had not proven anything at the professional level. He was, by any objective measure, a very promising prospect. His preference was to sign with Adidas. That was the brand he grew up admiring. That was who he wanted to represent. Adidas passed. Nike at that moment was in trouble. Their basketball division was losing money. They had almost no meaningful presence in the sport. Running was their world. Basketball was a market they were failing to crack. An executive named Sonny Vaccaro made an argument to Nike's leadership that most of them thought was insane. Stop spreading your basketball budget across dozens of athletes. Put almost all of it into one player, one story, one brand within a brand. They approached Jordan's camp with an offer so far outside the industry norm that his agent David Falk almost didn't take the meeting seriously. 5 years, $500,000 per year, plus royalties on every shoe sold, plus stock options. A total package structured to potentially reach $7 million. At a time when the highest sneaker deal in the NBA, held by James Worthy, was $150,000 a year. Nike was offering more than 3 times the previous record, for a rookie who hadn't played a single professional game. And they built in a protection clause. If Jordan didn't win Rookie of the Year, make an all-star team, or average 20 points per game within 3 years, Nike could exit the deal. He averaged 28 points per game his rookie year. Now here's the number I told you to remember. $126 million. That is how much Air Jordan shoes generated in revenue for Nike in the very first year of the deal. The internal projection, the number Nike had actually planned for, was $3 million. They were off by 42 times. Sit with that for a second. Because this is not just a story about a shoe. This is a case study in what happens when a brand stops buying advertising space and starts buying a human story. Nike didn't just put Jordan's name on a sneaker, they built an entire visual and emotional universe around him. The red and black colorway that the NBA initially fined him for wearing. The origin story of the rebel athlete who played by his own rules. The Jumpman logo, a silhouette of a man in flight, and that became one of the most recognizable symbols in the world. They weren't selling performance, they were selling aspiration. They were selling the feeling of what it might mean to be like him. And an entire generation of young people around the world decided that the closest they could get to that feeling was a pair of shoes. Over 4 decades, Nike has paid Jordan an estimated $1.3 billion. Jordan Brand today generates over $5 billion in annual revenue. By nearly every financial analysis, the 1984 deal remains the single greatest return on investment in the history of sports sponsorship. A $2.5 million bet that turned into a $10 billion empire. But here's the question that keeps me up about this story. Because there's a detail most people overlook, and it changes the entire lesson. Jordan didn't want to sign with Nike. His first choice was a company that didn't want him. And the brand that did want him, the brand that bet everything on him, was a struggling running shoe company that most basketball fans barely took seriously. What does that tell you about how sponsorship value actually gets created? Because here's the thing that almost no coverage of this story ever explores fully. Nike didn't just discover Jordan's value, they created it. They structured a deal that gave Jordan a financial stake in the brand's success, which meant his effort and his performance directly built the value of the asset he was attached to. The royalty structure turned Jordan into a business partner, not just a spokesperson. That alignment of incentives, that is the hidden engine behind the greatest sponsorship deals in history. When the athlete benefits from the brand's growth and the brand benefits from the athlete's success, the relationship becomes something more than transactional. It becomes generative. And leagues have spent the decades since trying to replicate that dynamic at scale. When the NBA signed a jersey patch program allowing teams to sell small branded spaces on game uniforms, it wasn't about the revenue from the patches themselves. It was about creating new categories of partnership, new ways for brands to buy into the emotional fabric of the game, not just the surface of it. When Formula One expanded its global sponsorship portfolio and started attracting luxury brands that had never touched motorsport, it wasn't because the cars got faster. It was because Formula One rebuilt its narrative, through media, through storytelling, through a Netflix documentary series, and gave brands access to a newly emotionally engaged global audience. The sport didn't change. The story around it changed, and that changed the value of every sponsorship attached to it. Here is the part of the story that very few people who write about sports business ever say out loud. You probably think sponsorship deals benefit brands most. That the brand is the one in the power position, writing the check, setting the terms, extracting value from the sports property. But the truth runs in both directions. And in many cases, the sports organization holds more leverage than the brand will ever admit. Teams, leagues, and athletes are not passive recipients of corporate money. They are, in the most precise economic sense, attention merchants. Their product is not the game. Their product is human attention and human emotion, two of the scarcest and most valuable resources in the modern economy. A league that can reliably deliver 50 million engaged, emotionally invested viewers to a single event has something that no amount of digital advertising spending can replicate. Because digital advertising can buy impressions. It can buy clicks. What it cannot buy is the specific quality of attention that a person gives to something they genuinely love. That quality of attention, undivided, unguarded, emotionally elevated, is what sports delivers. And that is why the brands keep coming back year after year with bigger and bigger checks. The NFL's total sponsorship revenue now exceeds $2 billion annually. The NBA pulls in over $1 billion per year. Formula One, since its global expansion, has seen sponsorship revenues more than double in under a decade. These are not accidents. These are the results of organizations that understood, at a fundamental level, that they were not in the sports business. They were in the attention business. And they structured their entire commercial model around selling that attention to the highest bidder. So here is the final thing I want to leave you with, and this is the part that I think genuinely changes how you see all of this. You've been told your entire life that sports is entertainment, that it exists to give you something to watch, something to feel, something to root for. And that's true. That's real. But underneath that entertainment product, underneath the games, the championships, the rivalries, the stories, there is a parallel economy that runs continuously, whether the games are happening or not. An economy built entirely on the monetization of your loyalty. Every emotion you've ever felt watching a game, every memory attached to a team or an athlete, every moment of joy or heartbreak you've experienced as a fan, all of it has a dollar value assigned to it somewhere in a boardroom. A brand looked at the depth of your connection to something you love and decided, we want to be next to that. We want to borrow that feeling. We want to be the name you say when you talk about where the game is played, or the shoes the player wore, or the company on the front of the jersey. Your passion didn't just create great memories. It created an asset that has been packaged, priced, and sold over and over again to the highest bidder. The next time you walk into a stadium and say its name, the next time you pull on a jersey with a sponsor's logo, the next time you see an athlete holding up a product in a commercial, you are not watching advertising. You are watching the business model of modern sports operate in real time. The logo on the jersey was never just a logo. It was always a financial claim on something you were never told was for sale. Your attention, your trust, your love of the game, the